Two metals. You can buy both at any hardware store for under $2 each. One is a coil of bare copper wire. The other is a galvanized bolt. Push them into damp soil a few inches apart, connect them with a single strand of wire, and the ground beneath your feet becomes a battery, not a metaphor. An actual electrochemical cell producing a measurable electrical current through the earth itself, releasing metal ions into the surrounding soil at concentrations that mosquito larvae, slugs, snails, and soft-bodied garden pests cannot survive. Not a $6 can of DEET spray that evaporates in 3 hours and was originally formulated as a chemical warfare agent for jungle combat. Not a $15 citronella candle that independent testing has shown reduces mosquito landings by less than half. Not a $300 propane trap that claims to protect an acre while you get bitten 10 feet away from it. Not a $400 seasonal spray service that fogs your yard with synthetic pyrethroids every 3 weeks and stops working by day 3 after each treatment. $4 of raw metal, 1 afternoon of installation. A system that runs on nothing but moisture in the soil, recharges itself every time it rains, and has not needed a battery, a refill, or a replacement since the day the underlying chemistry was first documented over 4,000 years ago. In 2015, researchers at Germany's Institute of Dipterology published a peer-reviewed study in the journal Parasites and Vectors that should have ended the insect repellent industry overnight. They placed a single 5-cent copper coin into a small water container with mosquito larvae. Within 2 weeks, every larva was dead, 100% mortality. The dissolved copper concentration measured less than 500 parts per billion. That is more than 2.6 times below the EPA's safe drinking water limit of 1.3 parts per million. One coin, 2 weeks. Total annihilation to mosquito larvae at a concentration safe enough to drink. That study was not front-page news. It was not featured in a single advertisement for any insect control product sold anywhere on Earth. Because the global insect repellent market is worth over $11 billion in 2026 and is projected to reach nearly $16 billion by 2031. A copper penny cannot generate recurring revenue, and what cannot generate recurring revenue cannot be allowed to spread. They did not suppress this because it failed. They buried it because you cannot patent copper, you cannot brand zinc, and you cannot put a subscription model on two metals that cost less than a fast food meal and last for years. This is the story of the copper-zinc earth battery, the oldest antimicrobial and pest control system in human history, and the one $4 setup and $11 billion industry praise you never push into your garden soil. If these stories matter to you, the subscribe button and the bell are the best way to make sure this knowledge survives. Now let me take you back to where this all begins. The year is approximately 2400 BC. A physician in ancient Egypt is writing on papyrus. The document will eventually be known as the Edwin Smith Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts ever discovered. In it, the physician recommends copper to sterilize the chest wounds and purify drinking water. More than 4,000 years ago, before microscopes, before germ theory, before anyone on Earth had a word for bacteria, an Egyptian healer understood that copper kept water fresh, kept wounds clean, and kept the biting insects of the Nile Delta away from containers lined with the metal. He did not understand ions. He could only observe the result. The Ebers Papyrus, written around 1500 BC, documents an entire pharmacology built around copper compounds, prescribed for burns, infections, headaches, and skin conditions. Across the ocean, the Aztecs, with zero contact with Egypt, independently discovered the same power. They used copper solutions as gargles for sore throats and topical treatments for infections. Mongolian nomads, thousands of miles from both civilizations, carried copper sulfate across the steppes to heal ulcers in the field. Hippocrates prescribed copper sauce for leg ulcers in 400 BC. The Romans applied copper solutions for ear infections and mouth ulcers across the empire. 5 civilizations on 5 continents with zero contact between most of them. Every single one arrived at the same conclusion. Copper is not just a metal. It is a weapon against the invisible world. In 1867, a French physician named Victor Burq observed something that should have rewritten the medical textbooks. During a cholera epidemic ravaging Paris, copper workers in the city's metalworking shops were almost entirely immune. Burq attributed their survival to what he called a rampart of copper dust surrounding their trade. Modern microbiology has confirmed the mechanism he described. Copper ions penetrate cell membranes and destroy the biological machinery of pathogens on contact. In 1841, a Scottish clockmaker named Alexander Bain buried 2 metal plates, 1 copper and 1 zinc, in the wet soil behind his Edinburgh workshop and measured the voltage between them. Approximately 1 volt of continuous current flowing through the earth with no acid, no generator, and no external power source. He called it the earth battery. What Bain did not know was that the electrochemical reaction between his 2 metals was also releasing copper and zinc ions into the surrounding soil at trace concentrations, creating a zone that insects and soft-bodied organisms would actively avoid. Now here's what modern science has confirmed about what happens when copper contacts water where mosquitoes breed. And this is the part the repellent industry does not want explained in plain language. In a 2020 study published in the journal PLOS One, scientists at Jichi Medical University in Japan exposed first instar mosquito larvae to varying concentrations of dissolved copper. At just 0.6 parts per million, larvae of Anopheles stephensi, the malaria vector across South Asia, and Culex pipiens, the house mosquito responsible for West Nile transmission, showed 100% mortality within 7 days. At even lower concentrations of 0.15 parts per million, copper significantly delayed pupation and reduced the number of adults that emerged. The survivors were smaller, less mobile, and less capable of breeding. Copper was not just killing the larvae, it was dismantling their entire reproductive cycle. The mechanism is devastating in its simplicity. Copper ions penetrate cell membranes, destroy DNA and RNA, and generate reactive oxygen species that shred cellular machinery from the inside. And here's the detail that should terrify every chemical company boardroom. Insects cannot develop resistance to copper. Unlike synthetic pesticides, unlike pyrethroids, copper's mechanism targets fundamental biochemistry shared by every living cell. There is no evolutionary adaptation pathway available. The same compound that killed insect larvae in Egyptian water vessels 4,000 years ago kills them with identical efficiency today because the chemistry is too fundamental to evolve around. The EPA limit for copper in drinking water is 1.3 parts per million. The lethal concentration for mosquito larvae is less than half that threshold. You can treat your bird bath, rain barrel, garden pond, or camping water container with copper, kill every mosquito larva in it, and still have water that meets federal safety standards for human consumption. A follow-up study from the University of Bonn confirmed that bimetallic copper-zinc particles showed enhanced larvicidal activity compared to either metal alone, producing mortality rates between 50 and 90% against field-collected mosquito larvae. The same 2 metals Alexander Bain buried in 1841. The combination was more lethal than either component. If you have made it this far, you already understand more about insect control than 99% of homeowners and most retail employees selling aerosol bug spray. Subscribe and share this with someone still spending $40 every summer on products that the industry designed to stop working by the weekend. Now stay with me, because what comes next is the part they really do not want you to hear. The global insect repellent market hit $11.4 billion in 2024. SC Johnson produces Off and Raid. Reckitt Benckiser produces Mortein and SBP. Spectrum Brands produces Cutter and Repel. Godrej produces Goodnight. Every single product these corporations sell is specifically designed to be consumed and replaced on a recurring schedule. Sprays that evaporate in hours. Coils that burn down overnight. Vaporizers with refill cartridges. Lotions that wash off in sweat. The entire business model depends on the product stopping to work so you buy more. A family spending $40 per summer on insect repellent, citronella candles, mosquito coils, and bug zappers could replace the entire system with a one-time investment of under $4 in copper wire and galvanized bolts. That is a 90% cost reduction with no expiration date, no refills, and no subscription. $4 once versus $40 every single year for the rest of your life. You cannot patent copper. You cannot trademark the chemical symbol CU. You cannot build a subscription model around a metal that hardware stores have stocked since your grandparents were children. And you cannot sustain an $11 billion industry on a product that costs less than a single can of synthetic spray and lasts for years without replacement. So the industry buried it the only way that works. Not by banning copper, by making sure it stays invisible. Copper wire sits in the electrical aisle. Galvanized bolts sit in the fastener section. Neither one appears anywhere near the aerosols and plug-in devices in the insect control section. The knowledge is not hidden behind a lock. It is hidden by retail geography, by the quiet decision to keep pest solutions, and their cheapest alternative in sections no homeowner would ever browse simultaneously. I need to be honest about the limitations, because credibility matters. Copper and zinc in soil will not create a force field that repels every flying insect from your property. What the science confirms is that copper ions are devastatingly effective against mosquito larvae in standing water. They are highly effective at deterring slugs and snails from garden beds. And the galvanic reaction between copper and zinc in moist soil releases trace ion concentrations that are measurably hostile to soft-bodied pest breeding cycles. What copper does not do is repel adult mosquitoes already in flight, does not create a barrier against flies or wasps, and in completely dry soil the electrochemical reaction slows dramatically. Use the copper-zinc system to eliminate breeding sites and deter soft-bodied pests, then combine it with physical barriers like screens and nets for adult flying insects. The foundation layer costs $4 and never needs replacing. Now here's exactly how to do it. Step 1. Buy a 10-foot coil of solid bare copper wire, 14 gauge or thicker, from any hardware store electrical aisle. Cost between $1.50 and $2.50. Step 2. Buy a box of galvanized steel bolts or nails from the fasteners section. Galvanized means zinc coated. A box of 10 costs about $1.50. Step 3. For standing water mosquito control, cut a 6-inch length of copper wire and drop it into any container that holds water on your property. Bird baths, rain barrels, flower pot saucers, watering cans, pet water bowls. The copper begins releasing ions on contact with water. Within 72 hours, concentrations reach levels lethal to mosquito larvae. Within 2 weeks, larval mortality approaches 100%. Change the water as often as you like. The copper stays effective for months. A single piece of wire in a bird bath costs less than 1 penny. Step 4. For the earth battery garden configuration, push a 4-inch length of copper wire into moist garden soil. 3 inches away, push in a galvanized bolt. Connect them above ground with a short length of insulated wire. The moisture acts as an electrolyte. The two dissimilar metals create a galvanic cell, the same principle Bain demonstrated in 1841. The reaction releases copper and zinc ions into the surrounding soil at trace concentrations that slugs, snails, and soft-bodied larvae actively avoid. Step 5. For raised bed protection, run a continuous strip of copper wire along the top edge of the bed frame and staple it in place. Slugs and snails crossing the copper experience a neurological disruption when their mucus contacts the clean metal. The Oregon State University Extension Service has documented the measurable electrical interaction that deters gastropods on contact. The vast majority the reverse direction immediately. Step 6. For foundation perimeter control, install copper wire loops every 2 to 3 meters around the damp soil near your home's foundation, each paired with a galvanized anchor bolt. The cumulative ion release creates a soil environment continuously hostile to soft-bodied pest breeding cycles. Step 7. Maintenance is minimal. Scrub the copper lightly with a nylon brush once a season to remove oxidation that slows ion release. Replace galvanized bolts every 2 to 3 years as the zinc coating depletes. Copper wire itself lasts 5 to 10 years before replacement. Total startup cost under $4. Annual replacement cost after the first 3 years, approximately 50 cents in galvanized bolts. A homesteader in eastern Tennessee tested the copper wire method across 6 raised garden beds over a full growing season in 2023. She reported a 90% reduction in slug damage compared to beds without copper barriers. Her total material cost was $3.12. The previous year she had spent over $35 on slug bait pellets requiring monthly reapplication, plus another $60 on aerosol repellent for evening garden work. Her pest control costs dropped from $95 per year to under $4 in the first season and under $1 every year after. The chemistry inside that $6 can of DEET spray was formulated in a laboratory within the past 50 years and requires continuous reapplication as active molecules evaporate and degrade. The chemistry inside a $2 coil of copper wire was discovered by Egyptian physicians in 2400 BC, confirmed by Hippocrates in 400 BC, observed by Victor Burq and cholera-immune copper workers in 1867 Paris, operationalized by Alexander Bain in 1841, proven in peer-reviewed entomology journals in 2015 and 2020, and sits in the electrical aisle of every hardware store in the developed world right now waiting for someone to recognize what it is. $11 billion in annual repellent revenue and depends on you never walking from the pest control aisle to the electrical aisle and picking up a $2 coil of wire. $6 DEET sprays depend on you believing that killing mosquito larvae requires a synthetic compound with a marketing budget attached. And $40 summer repellent budgets depend on you never reading a 2400 BC medical papyrus or a 2020 entomology study that described the exact same mechanism from opposite ends of human history. This knowledge did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared from the consumer awareness because it worked too well and cost too little for anyone to build a recurring product around it. Copper ions do not care about marketing budgets. Oxidative disruption does not negotiate with shelf placement. And an electrochemical cell powered by damp soil is never charged a licensing fee. If this video changed how you think about the mosquitoes in your yard, the slugs in your garden, or the $2 coil of copper wire waiting in the electrical aisle 3 miles from your house, then subscribe and share it now. Every single share puts this knowledge in front of someone the repellent industry assumed would never walk past aisle 9. And every subscription keeps this channel digging deeper into the secrets they thought were sealed forever